did several university studies, and they're finding that these stem cells essentially get stagnant because there's all these stem cells that reside in the hair follicles. And when they get stagnant, you have a loss of melanocytes, and melanocyte stem cells stop the production of hair pigmentation.
He was like, looked pretty young when he started. I think Obama as well.
That's who Dora said as well, Obama. And that's who I thought of too. I was like, look at that. I mean, in 8 years, he went from looking young and vibrant to graying and just a bit haggard. And so they found that the de-stressing events could actually bring color back to the exhausted fibers. And so they found that just by, in some cases, just by going on vacation, within 2 weeks, some of those hair follicles started to change and bring the color back into the hairs.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to the Unreasonable Health Podcast. This is your host today, Cade Archibald, and I am really excited to dive in. Before we dive in there, just want to touch on the Health Accelerator Challenge we had the episode prior, see how everyone's doing there. The challenge was to get rid of chemicals. So look at the foods you're eating. We talked about some of the differences between foods in Europe versus the United States, and really looking how you can clean up the food that you're putting in your body, as well as some of the chemicals that you're exposing it to. And so hope that challenge is going well. If you're not a part of our Health Accelerator challenges and community, go to acueastwest.com/hack. And you can register for that. We do live. It's a live session, so definitely recommend that. In today's topic, we got some really cool stuff we're going to be covering. Can't wait for that. And along with me, we got Regan Archibald. Regan, how you doing?
Really good. Good to be here.
Yeah, well, I'm excited for today's topic. What are we diving into?
So today we'll go through the peptide of the day, and then we're going to be talking about how to reverse graying hair and some very interesting research. And I'm going to give everybody a compelling reason why vacations are absolutely necessary for your long-term health. So that's going to be it. But before we jump in, the peptide of the day is Melanotan 2. And Melanotan 2 is a really fascinating peptide, and it really goes along with today's topic, because what it does is it changes the pigment of your skin. And so for those of us who love being outside for long periods of time and enjoy having the energetic exposure to the sun, because I think the sun is incredibly healing for our mitochondria, and it helps our cell division. We've live in a society where we try to get as little sun as possible, but actually our bodies and the way that our energy systems work is that the sun can be a great healer for us. And so a way that you can get exposure to the sun without getting damage from the sun and the UV rays is through using Melanotan 2. And I was just talking to a client yesterday, and he said the thing he loves about it the most is his skin looks great. And so he felt like it reversed his age by at least 5 years just by changing the pigment of his skin. And then he said it's one of those peptides where, you go to sleep at night and then the next day you wake up and you look even tanner. And so Melanotan 2 is, it's something that you can use, for about 7 days in a row, sometimes 14 days in a row, small amount to get your base tan built up. And then it's really once or twice a week. is all it needs to be used as maintenance. And it's great for helping your body resist infections. Mold toxicity is it's really good for Lyme patients. And then melanotan too is also really powerful as a sexual stimulant because it's that alpha melanocyte stimulating hormone, which also seems to work on the central nervous system for low libido. And so that's something that, is a nice benefit of melanotan 2 as well. And then melanotan 2, it stimulates what's called melanogenesis. So it brings the melanocytes and activates those, which is also a really important feature when it comes to graying hair. And so we'll dive in from there. But Cade, melanotan 2, have you used this one before?
Yeah, it's been a little bit since I've used melanotan, but it sounds like I need to just get some maintenance doses. Sounds like it's just awesome all around.
It is, yes. I think it's arguably it's a nice peptide just to stay on long term. Just for skin protection, and with the amount of sun that you get there in St. George, it's a tough one to beat. So get on that.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds like a great one. All right. Well, you heard it here. Get some melanotan 2, everybody.
Yes. And so let's jump into the topic. And the reason why I wanted to share this is because I think there's a lot of promise that we make when it comes to your overall health. And, we say we want you to look, feel, and perform your best at any age. And lately I've had more and more of our patients just say, hey, is there something natural I can do for my graying hair? And as I started researching it deeper, I found some very interesting findings. And so I'm actually really excited to try these, and I'll share with you what we've used to date that has been effective. There are certain things that just haven't proven to be true. There's a lot of gimmicky products out there. But I think, so what, the problem is like, how can we reverse graying hair naturally? And then in order to solve that problem, we have to go upstream and say, well, what's causing it in the first place? And then if we can reverse it, what are the most effective therapies that aren't going to have downstream adverse impacts on your overall health? So okay, this is a topic we've never covered on the podcast in all these years, hundreds of episodes. So
we're getting a little more vain here. I like it though.
Well, and I'm going to give some compelling reasons why it's not vain, and show you guys like, hey, if you look at the science behind this, there's some real interesting things that start to happen when our hair grays, and this can be a really good symptom of an underlying issue that could be addressed the sooner you can get on it. So, and for those of you who don't have gray hair, you couldn't care less. I mean, that's fine. But in Chinese medicine, one of the things that they talk about is when your hair grays, that means your kidney essence or your jing is, or your reservoirs of energy, that epigenetic factor in your body is compromised. And so you see there's a Chinese herbal formula called Hershao Wu, and which is polygonum for those of you who love your herbs. And polygonum is it literally Hershao Wu translates as old man hair darkening. And so even 3,000 years ago, Cade, in China, at least in parts of Asia, they did not like gray hair either. So because gray hair, it's like, my wife's always like, oh, it looks distinguished. I'm like, nah, I don't like it. And so, using a little bit of dye has been really nice. But now I'm like, well, why is the gray hair there? And I've always just thought, well, it's a natural part of aging. And our dad, he was gray in his 20s. He was like right by our age.
It was salt and pepper in his 20s, and then think mid-30s, he was like white. I don't ever remember Dad with colored hair.
I remember he colored his hair on his 50th birthday. Do you remember that?
It was purple.
And it went purple. It was that gray that he tried to go brown, and it just went straight up purple. So
well, white. It was white, and then when he tried to dye it, it's just yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And he did go through some stress. And so we're going to talk about that, and how that affects our hair. But if you think about what happens with our pigment in our hair, we have this melanin. And melanin is what gives it color. And so based on your genetic profile, you can have hair that's either dark or hair that's light. And at the root of the hair, you have this hair papilla. And these melanocytes are directly regulated by this hair papilla. And there's new cells that constantly need to replenish that melanin pigment and these melanocytes, because melanocytes are just cells that help the hair grow. And so you have these hair follicles. And one of the things that happens as we bald is the hair follicles die. And that's where, we've been doing stem cell transplants into the scalps of people's hair. And we see that there's really good progress. In about 6 months, you'll see about a 50% improvement in hair thickness and hair growth. And so that's pretty substantial. And a lot of our clients, though, we make sure to take a picture because they'll be like, I don't think it's come in much. And then they look at a before picture and then an after, and they're like, oh, yes, it did. Because, hair grows. It takes about 6 months to really get it to grow through. And so with the graying hair with this pigment, the thing that starts to occur is you have the stem cells, and there's several university studies, and they're finding that these stem cells essentially get stagnant because there's all these stem cells that reside in the hair follicles, and when they get stagnant, you have a loss of melanocytes, and melanocyte stem cells stop the production of hair pigmentation, and so as these melanocyte stem cells age, they disappear, and then this causes the pigment and the pigment producing melanocyte to disappear, which causes gray hair. Pretty interesting. So, if you think of stem cells, it's everything.
Yeah, really interesting. Because to your point before is, I've always thought of gray hair like it's kind of inevitable, and you just got to kind of go with it. But this is really intriguing. If there's some strategies and ways that you can avoid that, and understanding what causes it, I think is really important.
Yeah, and I think it even goes beyond vanity, as we'll see in just a minute here, because yes, the University of Alabama at Birmingham, they said, okay, well, the root cause is this loss of these melanocyte stem cells, and they stopped the production of this, the melanocyte, which creates the pigmentation in the hair. And so as I dove in deeper, I found a really interesting study where they're using topical formulation containing an alpha melanocyte stimulating hormone agonist, and it's called Grayverse. And this was in 2022. As I dove deeper into this Grayverse peptide is very similar to Melanotan. And what they found is that in the hair, there's multiple factors. There's the melanin stimulating hormone, or MSH. There's the adrenocorticotropic hormone. The adrenocorticotropic hormones, those are some of the stress hormones that can be triggered with cortisol. They found that there's the endothelin-1, the prostaglandins, the leukotrienes, the neutrophils, fibroblast growth factors, the nitric oxide, catecholamines, vitamins, and minerals. So if you think about graying hair, and if you say, well, all of these factors control the stimulation of this melanogenesis at the hair follicle, that's pretty substantial. So it's more than just stem cells. It's all of these different factors, hormone factors, growth hormones, nitric oxide, all the things that keep our cardiovascular system healthy, keep our brain healthy. these things start to change at the root level. And if you think of the 9 hallmarks of aging, one of the core hallmarks is loss of stem cell exhaustion, or stem cell exhaustion, loss of stem cell, proliferation. But the other thing is, if you look at, there's a loss of nutrient sensing. And so when you have vitamin and mineral deficiencies, that's going to lead to more graying. And then we know as we age, our bodies go into this sarcopenic tendency. We have this loss of proteostasis, so our muscle mass can start to break down. And that's where nitric oxide is so important. And using peptides like thymosin beta-4, BPC-157, those are really important peptides because they really boost the nitric oxide. And then if you're making sure that you've got adequate levels of this MSH, or the melanin stimulating hormone, using melanotan, you're actually reversing some of the aging process overall from that. So it's a pretty complex process that goes just beyond vanity. And so here's another study that was published in Cell Biology. And what they did is they did this quantitative mapping of human hair graying and reversal in relation to life stress. So this is the one where I said, I've actually got to share this on the podcast because I found it to be a really fascinating read. When I go on vacation, I just got back from Switzerland. I tend to do a lot of research, and I just, if I find a subject that's interesting, I tend to go a little deeper on it. And this came across one of my Medium articles, and I said, oh, this is fascinating. And so I wanted to dive in deeper. And so this was a study that was done at the University of Columbia. And the researchers, they identified 323 proteins that let us know if the hair was gray, white, or colored at any point in its history. Then they snipped the color from and gray hairs from the 14 participants who listed and rated the stressfulness of their life over the past year. And while they know there's a connection between graying and high stress, if you don't believe that, then look at the presidents. If you think of, Kate, can you think of the one president that started with really black hair and it went gray pretty quick?
I'm thinking George W. Bush when he was looked pretty young when he started. I think Obama as well.
That's who Dora said as well, Obama. And that's who I thought of too. I was like, look at that. I mean, in 8 years, he went from looking young and vibrant to graying and just a bit haggard. And so wow. I would be too if I was in that position. And, I think presidents who don't dye their hair, you can see it pretty dramatically. Yeah.
That stress is obviously, that's one of those factors that creates that gray and just ages.
Yeah, it's crazy. So in the study, it's kind of interesting because they took these people who are in their 30s, mid 30s, and they took a Caucasian male and they looked at the hair from the scalp. And once again, they're asking how much stress was there in your life over the past year. In the females, they used it from the pubic area because that seems to be where the graying can get triggered the quickest. And then they also did a 35-year-old beard. And that's where my graying started the fastest, was in the beard. And yours too, Cade?
Yes, mine as well.
And so there, what's that?
So very much so.
Yeah. And so, but what they found is they, as they looked at this, it began white, but they found there's actually a reversal that occurred in the participants. And so I'll do the reveal here, but they found that the de-stressing events could actually bring color back to the exhausted fibers. And so they found that just by, in some cases, just by going on vacation, within 2 weeks, some of those hair follicles started to change and bring the color back into the hair. So how many of you have noticed that your hair went pretty darn gray after a stressful event?
Oh, yeah.
There's no question about it for me, and I'll go back to our dad. I don't think he'd mind us sharing, but he wanted to be a cattle rancher, and when he was in his early 40s, he the bank that he was working for, there's a merger that happened. Key Bank came in and bought out Valley Bank, who he worked for as a manager, and then he said, "Well, I'm going to go into ranching." And went all into ranching, bought a bunch of cattle, put his whole life savings into it. And with farming, you're working nonstop. And so, that's making less than minimum wage or actually paying yourself to work is what he was doing at the time. And then he had a big contract, and the group that was going to buy his cattle, they backed out last minute, and so he had to sell the cattle at a discounted rate, and it wasn't profitable enough for him to keep going. So he had to get another job in banking and move out of Idaho and move to Nevada. And so that's the time where I saw Dad just go completely white. Big stressful event. And then by the time he's 50, he's trying to dye his hair, and it's too late. It's purple. It looks like Ronald McDonald. And Doris said, she started to get gray when I was 18 after getting hit by a car. Wow. Whoa. After 2 years of making peace with the messed up body, the gray hairs went away. Oh, well, there is a case study right there. That is awesome, Dora. That's exactly what the researchers are finding, is that, just by getting rid of some stress in the body, and it's easier said than done, that you can actually start to change the graying hair. I noticed that the first time I used epitalin, I noticed that my hair started to change in color. And epitalin is a telomerase enzyme, and really has a lot of potential just to clear up the stem cell signaling so that stem cells can get activated again. This is what the researchers said. They said, I was not surprised by any of the stressors that correspond with graying. I was surprised to see how strong of an impact a vacation had on the reversal of graying, says Isla Rosenberg, the lead author on the study. One participant went on just a 2-week trip, and amazingly enough, 5 of their hairs regained color afterwards. That's cool. So I think my Switzerland trip, I'm just going to go on a vacation about 1 or 2 weeks a month. And Misha actually asked me to, because she was able to get so much done with me gone, Cade. So because I'm constantly throwing projects at him. So maybe that's better. Yes. And Allison said, you can also have premature graying of the hair from chronic maladaptive stress response, chronic fight or flight or freeze state of the subconscious mind. I think that's a beautiful point as well. Is sometimes it's not even a stressful event. Sometimes it's our response to life in general. And I think that's what you're saying there, Allison, is where we have this maladaptive stress response where, we lose our minds in the smallest little things. And we are great at writing fiction about how scary the future is going to be. And I think it was Dale Carnegie. I was at this really cool hotel in Arosa, Switzerland. And if you guys look it up, you'll see just like the mountains there. The whole village is just gorgeous. But in the elevator, it said our fears are, something I alluded to. I wish I could quote it better, but it was, our fears are the worries. Remember that yesterday's fears, basically didn't come true, and here it is today. So our worries are yesterday's fears, essentially, and so we have this ability to create problems that never actually come to life. And so if we look at what's at the cellular level, all researchers, kind of have the same conclusion, that when our hair regains color, it's stem cells swinging into action. And if you think of the work that Bruce Lipton has done, okay, do you remember me talking about Bruce Lipton, or do you know who he is? He wrote Biology of Belief, that book.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
So he was the first researcher to take stem cells And this was decades ago. And he realized that the stem cells are very responsive to the environment around them. And so just by changing the environment and changing the inputs of those stem cells, you could actually get, this complete, expression of stem cells, that were very dictated based on the environment. So you can feed stem cells different nutrients, and you can expose it to different types of cells or precursors to cells, and then the stem cells will take on that particular lineage. And that's what's fascinating, is we've been deploying stem cell therapy for 13 years now, and had over 20,000 successful case studies. And one of the things that we've learned is that when you can retrain your body's stem cells and call them into action, that's when you can really see some amazing transformations in your body. But just what the research is showing here is that by getting that stress response, or as Allison pointed out, that maladaptive chronic stress response reversed, you'll start changing the environment so that your stem cells can start to proliferate again. And so I think it's fascinating. By the way, I have nothing against gray hair. I think there's a lot of people who actually look better with gray hair. No question about it. So just so we don't get canceled. No.
Not trying to offend any silver foxes. Is that what you're saying, Regan?
Yeah, myself included. It's like Doris says she loves Bruce Lipton. But here's the study that, thanks, Allison. Here's the study that links stuck gray hairs to turning gray. And so if you see the slide on the left, and for those of you who are listening to our podcast, go to YouTube if you want to see this image, but you can see there's these cells that are just in a stagnant state. And they're basically dormant stem cells. So they're still there. It's not like the stem cells expire, go away. There's not senescence that happens. But what you see in the next slide is where the stem cells are actually, producing that melanocyte. And so you have the melanocytes, which gives the hair the melanin that gives it the color. And so pretty amazing how it works. And so in the studies, what they found is they said, our study adds the basic understanding that how melanocyte stem cells work to color hair. This is the lead investigator. This is another study, the New York University Langone Health. He said the newfound mechanisms raise the possibility that the same fixed positioning of melanocyte stem cells may exist in humans. If so, it presents a potential pathway for reversing or preventing the graying of human hair by helping jam cells to move again between the developing hair follicle compartments. So it's almost like, clearing up that energy stagnation. And this is where, acupuncture can be really helpful. We talked about the herbal formula polygonum, using GHK copper. You can take GHK copper foam. And what the Korean researchers discovered back in 2015 is that when you applied GHK copper to a joint that was damaged, you'd actually see the stem cell proliferation. Or if someone had a stem cell transplantation into a knee and then GHK copper was applied, you actually saw an improvement in the results. And that's what we've seen when we've injected stem cells into the scalp. We've done that for years. And then we've seen an improvement of about 20% by using GHK copper on the scalp, as well as thymosin beta-4. And so there's some fascinating things that you want to do to deploy the stem cells, because if the stem cells are working better in the hair follicles, these melanocyte stem cells, then you're going to have stem cells that are working better in your entire body. And this is where, I love doing, getting my IVs a couple times a year. I always feel more just solid, grounded, more vitality, and it's exciting to see. So the other thing that the researchers said out of the New York City Langone Health, they said, It's the loss of the chameleon-like function of the melanocyte stem cells that may be responsible for graying and loss of hair color. These findings suggest that melanocyte stem cell motility and reversible differentiation are key to keeping hair healthy and colored. And then I would have to argue that it's one of the most important things when you start adding in the lifestyle, because at East West, we've got 3 primary goals. We believe when health improves, everything improves. And so even if it's our hair, it's still part of your body. It's an important feature, but when you look at that core principle, it's like, well, what else improves? Usually when we look our best, we feel our best, our self-confidence goes up, our desire to do things go up. We have this renewal of life, and I think there's some real merit to taking a break. If for those of you who are on the Health Accelerator session last night, you probably heard me talk a little bit more about my vacation to Switzerland and just how renewing it was, and seeing new cultures. And we compared the foods, and I tried to not be too critical of some of the farming practices in the United States, but because there are certain places in Europe that they have adopted similar practices, but the majority of Europe has not, which makes it a nice place to find really amazing food everywhere you go. And so that makes a difference. And people tend to live a bit longer over there than we do here in the United States. And so I think stress is hopefully this podcast today, this show will help you kind of reconsider what you may need to do to start unplugging. But Cade, what did you get out of the conversation today?
Yeah, well, it seems like there's some really cool potentials for reversing gray hair. I've never really thought or considered that, other than you can do the dyes and different things like that. And so I think that's amazing. And then the stress factor, I've always kind of had an understanding that stress ages you, which then in turn is going to create some issues with or create some gray hair. But yeah, just seeing the diagram with the melanocytes and how stem cells impact those really makes a lot of sense. And so if you can wake those up, that's actually really exciting. So I think there's some really cool treatment and procedure possibilities with this.
Yeah. And not only that, but, you just think of the overall body regeneration. Our second principle at East West is, we want to make your next decade your healthiest decade, and you got to have stem cells to help you get there. And so that's the beautiful thing, is when you put in these new healthy stem cells, we use them from the umbilical cords of healthy mothers. That's where we see the body just come back to life and start regenerating. And so, there's just a lot to be said about that. So for those of you who have not come to one of our longevity retreats, it gives you an amazing opportunity to really start putting some energy into your future and investing in your future by getting some of these regenerative therapies. We've had a lot of people end up getting their face done, their hair done with the stem cells, and they just have a really amazing experience. But it also helps create a little more vitality in the body. So, and then our third is no death by neglect. And so that's when, we don't know what we don't know until we test. And so that's where testing becomes a real critical piece there too. And at the retreats, we'll use the carotid artery scan, and we'll also run your blood labs. We may do other testing as well while you're there. But it's a really amazing, fun time. And many of you who are on this today, I appreciate you guys coming to the retreats. And maybe if you're able to type it in the chat box, share your experience at some of the retreats. But I find those to be incredibly rewarding. And it's a way of de-stressing your body, just taking a day out. And if you're coming from out of town, maybe think about spending the week in Utah and just travel around and, come hang out in the clinic and get some great therapies, spend some time in the biohacking room, meet some cool people in the community. And that's a great way that maybe when you return home, you'll have 5 or 6 of your gray hairs that turn back to color like other participants have.
Love that. Awesome. Well, I think that's a great reason to come to the retreats, or at least come visit us in person.
Yeah.
I had a question come in. Do we need both peptides and stem cells for gray hair, or reversing gray hair, I'm assuming?
We've seen some minimal changes with just peptides, but if you're looking to get the best treatment possible, the best outcome, both are going to be absolutely necessary.
Awesome. Well, very cool. Thank you so much, Regan. That was some amazing content. If you're interested in learning more about the retreats, you can go to acueastwest.com/retreats. And I think we host those on a fairly regular basis. So take a look at that if you haven't been able to attend one of those yet. And we'll look forward to seeing you guys next time. Awesome. See you, everybody.
Bye-bye.